Hi, everyone. We have an Dorado rum today, another one, just following on from the Port Morant that I talked about the other day. And the reason why I'm bringing this up so fast is not just because the rum itself that we're looking at today was issued in 2024, in February, in point of fact, but because it encapsulated much of the concepts that I was bringing together when I was talking about the PM at the same time. Now, just for the stats of this thing, let's just talk about that very quickly. This is the El Dorado blended rum, 57%. It is a 2012 distillation that was issued in 2024, so it's a 12-year-old at 57%, which by itself is really quite interesting in and of its own self. But it marries two different marques, if you want to call them that. One of them is the DHE, or the Diamond High Ester, which comes from a double report copper, not wooden, pot still that they have, which of course has been making all sorts of high ester rums that they folded into their blends for time out of mind. Now, Guyanese would know that the Superior High Wine, which is like three lies in one, was primarily from that still, and it's kind of like a local fixture, even though it's never really exported. I have really good fond memories of it. The other portion of the blend here is the LBI mark. Now, LBI stands for La Bonne Intention, and it is an estate not too far up the east coast of the Demerara, and I have very good memories of going there to the sports club to swim when I was a boy, and the family would go there, and Dad would go playing tennis, and me and my brother would go either sneaking into the billiards room, playing table tennis, or swimming in the pool. Just a total irrelevancy, really. All right, so what we're talking about, though, is a mark that we've not really seen very much of before. If you recall, and if your memory goes back long enough, Vellier put out two LBI marks way back during the age of Vellier's Demeraras. Now, this would be a 1995 and a 1997 LBI rum, and then they just kind of dropped out of sight because they weren't the best. They lacked some of that cachet of the Port Morants and the wooden stills and what have you, but they weren't at the bottom either. I mean, it wasn't like they were very bad rums. The question is then, what did they do here? Well, we don't know the proportions of the blend, but what they've done is they've married the two and aged them for 12 years. And that's very interesting because it seems like in one fell swoop, DDL has tried to do something that is actually rather unusual. First, they've given us a very obscure mark that not very many people know the profile of, the LBI. And secondly, they've kind of like genuflected in the direction of the high ester crowd that wants to have these, huge amount of congeners and esters and flavorful compounds and aromas and what have you, just to see what's there. Now, the bottle doesn't actually say what is the ester level, but I have heard it bruited about it's 1,500 grams per liter of pure alcohol. I'm not actually sure. I will update my own written review that accompanies this video as soon as I find out. The real thing is that it's actually quite interesting. We really want to know more about this because, everybody knows about the major heritage stills and their product and what they taste like. I've talked about it on more than one occasion, well, many, many occasions, and so have many others, but we don't actually see this kind of thing very often. Certainly there are obscure marks like KFM and from Lusignan, and then there's, of course, the SWR from Skeldon and so on. We kind of like are spoiled for choice from Demerara. With the amount of stills they got there, I'm really not surprised at all. Just keep in mind, though, that because the LBI distillery, they actually did have one from the late 1800s to about 1959 or so. But in the first wave of consolidation where I think it was Booker's started to consolidate all of its estates into single huge distilleries, the LBI distillery was dismantled and it was used for what it could be used for, and the rest was scrapped somewhere around 1962, 1963. So there's no question but that this is not from that original still. It is actually made from the French savalle still, which is of course a very versatile, very old still of their own. And I imagine that they've got copious tons of notes in their archives that say how they're supposed to make it and what are the necessary conditions for producing the LBI mark. We, however, don't actually know very much about it. And since nobody, except perhaps me, and a few others have tried the original LBI, or at least what we hope is the LBI, and I seriously doubt that too, we don't know what the profile is, so we got to take a bit on faith on that this is what it is. And the thing is, of course, that the high ester part is going to dilute the taste of that. So let's just know what it is that we're drinking here. It is a reproduction of the LBI marque. It is a high ester rum with an unknown level of congeners. But what is that like? Well, I can't tell you. I'm actually quite excited to try. Wow. Oh, that is nice. That 57%, perfect strength. 40%, I don't think we would have gotten quite as much out of it. So first of all, there's three different components of this thing. The first thing is, of course, the ester side of things. So we get strawberries, we get bubblegum, we get some very sharp, tart, yogurt-like flavors. We get gooseberries, and that kind of unripe fruit that still has a fair amount of sharpness left in it. We get a lot of that. The more traditional midpoint is things like figs, caramel, bonbons, leather, smoke, a little bit of sawdust from cedar wood or something like that. It's really quite aromatic, and some flowers on top of that. And the third component is essentially a bunch of spices. So here we've got cloves, cardamom, cinnamon, vanilla for sure. That comes from the barrel. It is export age as far as I'm aware. So in that sense, the nose really is terrific. I think it's a really, really good nose. And I mean, you could probably enjoy this forever. I mean, I've had this on the go now for about 2 hours and I'm still finding new stuff in it. Yeah, a little bit dry too. It's really quite nice to taste. You're getting pretty much everything that you already had on the nose transferring over to the palate. There's nothing new here. In fact, point of fact, there's a little bit less. It is very firm, very not sharp at all, but sort of like strong in a sort of like a hot, very powerful tea kind of way that carves its way down your throat without doing undue damage. I quite like it, actually. So again, we get those spices of cardamom, cloves, and cinnamon with that vanilla background, which is ubiquitous, but thank God it's not so much as to be overwhelming. It really isn't. You do get caramel and brown sugar and a little bit of molasses, perhaps. Not a whole lot. It's like a hint more than anything else. And, you know, there is some nice pastries going on here, like croissants with fresh hot butter. I mean, I've been to Paris and it's just one of my favorite ways to start the day, to have something like that, to go into a bakery where they've just freshly started taking shit out of the oven. That's what this reminds me of so much. And that's one of the reasons I like it, because, of course, one of the purposes of drinking rum in this way is to bring yourself back to a state of mind and a sort of like a memory of what you once had in a way that makes the entire experience a very positive one. In this case, that's absolutely the case. More than that, the finish actually does take a fairly long time, and I'm not sure why that is. Of course, the 57% is part of it. The questions that a couple of people have raised is, has this been sweetened? I actually couldn't tell you. I did not have the opportunity to test this with my hydrometer. I will put this in my written review at some point when I get home and I kind of do this. I'm somewhere else, obviously. Be that as it may, I think this is a terrific nose, a really strong palate, you know, with lots of good stuff about it, a finish that just goes on for a fair bit, and it's something that you could drink from here till sundown, and in point of fact, I did. How much did this cost? In Canada, this costs $100. I really don't know where it is for sale elsewhere. I have looked online in a number of different places. It's sold out in a number of places in Europe, but it is still able to be found. I wish I could tell you what the outturn was. They just don't tell you this shit, and I really wish they'd stop that. You know, it is a kind of like a limited edition, but they never tell you how limited it actually is. So I'd like to think that they're kind of going to continue trying to make this, you know, as one of their, not their core range so much, but as something that they put out semi-regularly. I couldn't tell you. Now, the general commentary on the blogosphere has been reasonably positive. There was a recent gentleman on the Facebook page, the Rum Club Canada, who commented that he got it, and then other people started weighing in, and in the various comments we started to hear things like, you know, great nose, you know, shabby palate and so on. I don't really agree with that. I'm going to score this just about 88 points because I really think that it deserves it this time. You know, I don't always like the way El Dorado or DDL does things. I think their marketing often sucks. You don't hear enough about the new releases, and, you know, their masterclasses or their rum festival attendance is spotty at best. But this is a rum that I absolutely think you should give it a shot if you can afford the $100 that it costs, which is Canadian dollars, of course. So it'll be less in euros and in US dollars and what have you. It's one of those rums that DDL has finally figured out how to market within its core range properly. It's got the same bottle. It's got, it looks like a 15 or a 12-year-old, and that'll grant it instant recognition in a way that the rares, of course, as I commented before, never had. So all that considered, it's a decent rum for 88 points at 57%, blend of stills, and it's a nice addition to their range, and I really hope that you do like it. If you think that it's worth a comment and you disagree with anything I say, by all means, just let me know what you think. But for my money, I think it's really worth the buy. So that's it for today, and I will see you again later. Take care. Bye-bye.